we aren't going to put it online or anything. So you
Okay,
don't have
that's all right.
No guarantees though.
No guarantees, huh?
He's already on YouTube, so
Okay,
yeah.
you ready?
Yep.
I'm ready.
Okay, now go.
Okay, first thing, when you're setting it up, always start at your tractor and work back. That's so important. And the first thing we did when we set it up is we got this parallel to the surface that we're working on. Hopefully it's a level surface so you can get better adjustment and more accurate. Set it so this is also parallel to the ground. And then set your cultivator so that the gang here is parallel. Same distance here as it is in front. And then after you've done that, we want all the gauge wheels to be on a 2-inch block, a 2x4, to set the depth. And we want all the points of the sweeps to touch the ground or the cement here at the same time, level across it. We want the front sweep here, this back wing, to be 1.5 inches, 1 3/4, give or take. The closer you can get at that, the better. On both sides. The following sweeps, number 3 and number 4, we want them level, with the weight being on the front point of the sweep and the back wings, making sure that they don't touch with more pressure than the point, because we want it to go on the ground and to lay and throw the soil horizontally instead of picking it up and covering up your crop. We'll want the inside wingtip of number 1 and number 2 sweeps to be 2.5 inches from where your row is going to run to start with, and that can be adjusted in and out as needed. You can individually move these shanks up and down. We want to be in the ground about 1 inch to 3/4 inch up from this point right here on the sweep. And if an individual sweep needs to be lowered, you can lower it. If the whole gang needs to be deeper, you can raise the gauge wheel and make the whole gang lower. And if you need to, when you go to the field, when you take off, the cultivator will roll a little bit forward, making it so the back sweeps will not go in deep enough. And in that case, you need to lengthen your third length to make sure that when the cultivator's in the ground and under operation and under load, that it'll run as the same depth front as it does in the rear. And if it does on an individual gang, you can adjust the individual gang by loosening the lock nut here and changing the turnbuckle to put an individual row in the ground. And sometimes that happens when you're the one following a wheel track. Because of the compaction, you'll need to lengthen this more than you will one that's going to run where there's no wheel compaction. On your cutter wheels out here for guidance, you'll want to, when you have it raised up, bring this spring up here as far as you can get it by loosening this lock nut right here, the set screw. And I usually take a bar and put it in here from here to here, and I pry that up as tight as I can get it. Of course, this will be dropped down all the way. This will be down as far as it can go, stopped with this stop here. Then I want to compress this spring as much as I can and tighten this nut so that this runs in the soil as deep as we can get it, to right about there at least. This should get shiny if you cultivate very many acres. We want to take all the slop out of this and put new bearings in here, or get one that the bearings are tighter. Okay, and make sure all your gauge wheels spin and don't make noise, and have a couple extras put together ready to go if a bearing goes out. I can't think. Can you think of anything else, Jeff?
This, you said that you want 11 inches. Is that a minimum,
Yes.
or is that just?
As a rule of thumb, very good question. As a rule of thumb, this is your first sweep right here. This is number 1 because it leads.
Mm-hmm.
This is number 2,
Mm-hmm.
and from this one to the first one to the second one, or to the, I should say, from the second one to the third one to the fourth one, and if there's a fifth one, you should space that evenly.
Okay.
So if you're going to do 11 and 11, fine. If you're going to do this in 14 and you put that in behind the kink and then add on, weld on a piece, then you want to keep them pretty much spaced evenly apart.
Okay.
All right?
And 11 inches is a good starting point.
That's right. 11 inches under normal conditions, 11 inches is pretty standard.
Okay.
You can get through a lot of stuff with that the way it is right there. Okay? Have another question or something I didn't cover?
I'm trying to think.
You talked about angling fenders by
Right. I always, if you notice here, there's some of the bolts sticking out. And that's so that this angles, the front of the fenders will be wide, funneling the crop in, and also there will be less plugging between this shank and the fender that hangs on here if this is angled over here a little bit, creating an effect that will allow, limit how much organic matter has to go through there. See if there's anything else I can think of here. If you have a sweep that won't go in the ground, you can change this nut back here and pitch it in a little bit. The challenge you have, if you pitch it too much down and point it in, it'll start slabbing and slivering and covering up crops. So then you have to slow down, and when you slow down, it jeopardizes the quality job you do.
Okay. And you want full 8s on 1, 2, 3, and 4, or do you want
Full
full 8
10,
inch?
10 inches on 3 and 4.
sweeps. On the front sweeps, I'd like to see you start out with full 8s. I think you'll get along better because there'll be more distance from the shank to the fender. You can put
Okay.
the fenders as far out from this as you possibly can. And on the back, full 10s is what I've run for years
On 3 and 4.
on 3 and 4. 3, 4, and 5, you always set them as flat as you can and still get them in the ground.
Okay.
Because as soon as you pitch them in the least little bit, they'll start slabbing and throwing soil.
Okay.
And then you got to slow up. And you want to set the cultivator, go to the field, and your objective is to get the cultivator to go 5 miles an hour and not cover up crop.
Okay.
And that's the key. Rather than set the cultivator, go to the field, and if all you can get out of is 2.5 miles an hour, be satisfied with that. The objective is to set your speed first and then make the cultivator work with that speed.
Okay.
And the speed should be as close to 4 3/4 as possible. But there's exceptions to every rule. Whatever does the job, you have to do whatever. Sometimes this organic matter won't flow through. You have to raise fenders. You have to change things. And when you do that, you may have to slow down. But you just always work toward that ideal speed, which is 4 3/4, 5 miles an hour, somewhere in there.
Talk about your trick on clearing the gangs off where you back up.
Yeah. Clear
Right,
the shovels.
very good point. If it plugs on you where you've got more organic matter that can get between the fender and the shank in here, the best thing to do, stop the tractor, don't raise the cultivator up, put it in reverse and gently back up. And the dirt from behind will push the plug out. You raise the cultivator up, you pull forward a foot or a couple feet or so ahead of the plug where it dropped out on the ground. You drop the cultivator, you set the cultivator down, you back up until this sweep here is behind the point where it was where you stopped.
So you just shove all that trash back
Shove it all back.
to where you've already worked?
That's right.
Okay. Okay.
And then there's no spot where you haven't got the weeds, where you've left weeds.
Okay.
A lot of times people will raise the cultivator up, go around and clean it all out, and then pull ahead 6 feet, drop it in and start cultivating again. You've got, a big area there with weeds. And this way you can do a very, very good job. Always make sure that these fenders are free floating up and down, because as clumps of stuff get in here, in order to let it pass, these will raise up and let stuff pass. And if they're froze and not floating, they'll plug and they'll just keep plugging, and they can't relieve the pressure and let the stuff pass by, so they plug more often.
What is the starting point, like whenever we get this row done, as far as the gap between these two?
Okay, when you get these set in to where they need to be, okay, oftentimes I'll have 2 inches in front, because this is opened up here about probably an inch over from being straight, and that's over there an inch farther. A lot of times mine, when I'm in operation going through the field, the back of the fenders will touch,
Okay.
and the crop just slipped through, and nothing but crop, the weeds are gone.
And as far as when to cultivate, you base that off of the weeds or off of the crop?
Both.
Okay.
Usually when you plant the crop, the soybeans and corn have a big kernel in a lot of groceries. Weeds have a tiny, tiny kernel in very few groceries. As soon as they go on their trip, they run out of groceries. So they've got to glean for soil nutrients. And so the corn and soybeans will usually outgrow anything in the field up to a point. And then once the weeds get rooted in, they'll take off and surpass the corn and beans. So at that point in time where the corn and beans are getting bigger than the weeds, at some point it starts going like this, where the corn and the beans and the weeds are catching them. At that point, to start to close the distance is when you want to cultivate. So the day after you realize, that's when you should have been called. But that's the gut feel. You just learn by experience. And when you're setting it up also, if you were to raise this tractor up right now, you want to make sure that when you measure down, you can either measure the top or the bottom, but you want the toolbar here on this end and that end to be the same height, so it doesn't raise up and one side is lower than the other. There's several reasons for that. Number one, if you're trying to control your depth and you want to run all these at a straight, this side, these may be hanging down because this side's high and the other side may be pulling in, so that side of the cultivator is running deeper, this is running shallower. And the other reason is, let's say you've got wet spots in your field and you don't necessarily want to just stop and turn around. You'd like to just go ahead and cultivate through them because otherwise you'll have a weed patch. So you sacrifice it, you work it a little wet, you cultivate it a little wet because you want to get through it. If you ease up very carefully on your 3-point hitch, you put more weight on the tractor tires, getting more traction, you can actually walk through those wet spots and still control the direction of your cultivator. If one side's going in deeper because one side raises out and one side doesn't, what happens to the front of your tractor? You turn. You can't control it. So that's important. Also, how much weight you got on the front of the tractor is important too. You want the right amount to stabilize that front end and get through the field and stay straight. Let's see. I would also, if you have time, find washers. I think they're inch, and washer this between the 3-point hitch and the pin. So that's always tight. Not tight, but it keeps your cultivator so that all day long it stays the same place behind your tractor. Doesn't move over a half inch. Also, you want the right size pin here. I know you just put this in here just to lift it. But get an inch, full inch pin, so that's good and tight. And let's see. I think that pretty well covers everything I can think of now. I'm sure there's other things we need to cover.
I know one thing. The outside bar. You talked about extending that out and having a couple different settings for this gauge wheel. How
Yes.
far would you go with that? And
I would add on 2 more holes. A lot of times you can cut a piece off somewhere and weld it on the front of this so that you can move this ahead 1 hole or 2 holes.
okay.
If you just weld a piece there with 2 holes like this, then you miss an opportunity to have more adjustment.
Okay.
So I would add 1, 2, 3 more holes. No, 2 more holes. 2 more holes, but make this hole here line up with the very next hole, so
Yeah.
you can still use that one. And another thing, this outside row or outside gang does not need to be, and it's not, I guess. It looks like to me this is 30 inches and this won't be. That's 26. You want to make sure that when this gang is into where you've got 2.5 inches from the inside tip of your sweep, that you still have this here adjustment about halfway. Okay, that will get you away from this problem.
Okay.
See the problem here? How close that is. Also, this can plug here. So if you can get this a few more inches in, and this gauge wheel forward, you'll eliminate a lot of your plugging, because what happens, there will be a ridge of fresh tilled soil right here from the pass you made the other direction. Okay, and it's got to run in that loose soil, and it will want to plug. And I would also put this gauge wheel, or one like this, over here, because then the wheel, if it's plugging here, okay, you want the wheel turning on this side of the framework, because this action of turning helps keep it cleaned out. When it wedges up against here, there's no place for it to go, and this has friction, and it'll stop it. Where if this wheel was over there, where the rubber is turning on the outside of this, then it won't. Now, if you have problems with it plugging on this side, then this is the wheel you want on there, because the wheel is turning on the place it plugs. Helps keep it cleaned out.
Okay.
That was a very good question. We need to cover that.
And then you talked about whether you run a left hand or a right hand. Depends on which
Right.
one's first.
Exactly. Exactly. On this one here, I would have a wheel on the other side, because number 1 shank is right here. It's not here. This is number 2, and it's farther back by a couple inches. So you're more apt to plug here than here, because there's more distance. From here to here, there's more distance from here to here. So if the wheel is, the rolling of the wheel is on this side, it helps keep this cleaned out.